Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to do the notion of the screens behind me, but hopefully I'll be able to synchronize. So the response to the Enhancing Equity Task Force that staff has put together is entitled Helping All Students Succeed. And we did that on purpose because what I hope is coming through in what's in front of you is that students are at the center. Secondly, students' interests, strengths, passions, their story, and their needs are front and center. So though I've certainly been listening closely to all the concerns about the one-size-fits-all model that might be out in our community, I want to start and say clearly and emphatically that that's not the intent. What's in front of our board this evening is a response that's intending to really look at each and every student. But going out from there, it means each and every student's success. Going out from there, what structures, processes, practices support that? What structures, processes, practices, policies, and so forth don't? So this is our response. And basically, I think it's always important to start with the why. Why are we doing this? And we started many, many months ago, and it was built upon many, many years of work before that. We're doing this because we believe in public education and what it means for all students. We're doing this because, and I'm thrilled to say this publicly again, everyone who wrote in, participated in this process and engaged this process, spoke about access of opportunity, access that leads to great outcomes. And it did say to us that a lot of our families, and we heard it this evening, believe we're doing really well. So please keep doing that. But we also heard that maybe, in some cases, we're not. Those voices may not have been as loud in the room this evening, but because this has been a long process, we actually did hear those voices. And of course, our responsibility is to provide the opportunities that keeps the bar high and closes the gap. This cannot be a win-lose proposition. Equity work, as we all know, is not a win-lose proposition. But we have to keep some things in mind. Right now, we are in danger of leaving some of our students behind. We do know that students from our racialized communities, in particular our Black students and our Indigenous students, our data suggests it. We do know that our LGBT students are still sharing with us their struggles. We do know that mental health plays a factor in terms of kids feeling included. We do know that there are many other discriminations that could take place that we have to actually name. And our job, I believe, as senior team working with you, our board, is to be very, very concrete about that work. And this is why some change is required. I won't go through this next slide, but it's the actual 6 recommendations from the Enhancing Equity Task Force. I just wanted to put them there to remind us that staff did not choose to go through that particular report line by line and make specific responses about each and every aspect of that report. However, I hope that you are seeing that all aspects of those recommendations were at least considered in this response. So our staff response: professional learning, challenging the concept of streaming and exclusion, the examination of policies, procedures, and practices that affect access, opportunity, outcomes, enhancing engagement and voice, equitable allocation, development of a strategy to improve Black student achievement, and of course, equitable recruitment, hiring, promotion, and placement practices. And again, you've read the report, so I'm not going to actually go into that level of detail, but I do want to say a few things. Sometimes we may not realize the power of professional learning that needs to happen each and every day in classrooms and in schools, as well as at network or center or system level. Professional learning is what drives change to attitude and practice, and it needs to be meaningful. And we've made some public commitments in this direction around anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-oppression, and equity. We've made some strong commitments around Indigenous education and everything that is important and connected to that. And then when I said in the report that some of our staff might need to be involved in learning around special education or in learning around literacy and numeracy and so forth, That's not to say that they are less important. It's just that when we're talking about 37,000 employees, some of them do not have the responsibility to be delivering education, so that's why the word some is there. I'm mentioning that explicitly because I've gotten some feedback. Well, why wouldn't all educators be expected to have learning opportunities in special education? And that is the intent. The however, though, is we're not suggesting a paradigm which always means large group learning with an expert in the front of the room, forgive me, with the PowerPoint on the screen, because we know some things about adult learning, and that's actually not always the most effective strategy. So we will, of course, collaborate and engage to make that happen. I think one of the most amazing portions of this report is our willingness to challenge the concept of streaming. And when I use the term streaming, every media report that I have been asked to participate in the last week thinks we're talking about grade 9. It's not simply about grade 9. It's about those cultural, systemic, attitudinal issues that can impact students from the moment they walk into our schools. Let me give you a concrete example. We know, and the research says, that when we intervene effectively in kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2, gaps close and trajectories change. We know that. Yet, we also know that when we might greet a little 4-year-old who may not have the same vocabulary development on day 2 of kindergarten, things can start happening with our bias. And that can impact program, and that can impact our expectations. Take it to the next level. A student might be struggling with the basic skills required by grade 2 or 3. How many times then do we move to a special education program? I'm not suggesting when it's required and needed we won't have it. That maybe is actually misidentifying what's actually happening. Then we have our data of what happens in some of those special education programs in terms of pathways. Then we have the data that speaks to what goes on with behavior. Do we understand behavior as a communication? That we have to understand what the child is telling us, or does behavior move into a suspension that, again, could become problematic? Streaming then is impacting our grade 9 and 10, because what we've come to understand is we only have I want to demystify this applied thing, because I'm hearing it all over the place. We only have 16% of our students who are choosing the applied stream right now, down from numbers in the mid to high 20s many years ago. Of those 16% choosing the applied stream, almost 60% have special education needs. Do you see what I mean by streaming? What have we actually created within those 16%? Overrepresentation of our racialized communities, in particular our Black students. We have moved students from academic to applied for years, and our academic data has not plummeted. Where am I going with this? Culture, attitude, practices. Will we always need to provide special education supports? Absolutely. I'll speak about that in a minute. But the concept of streaming is not simply about grade 9. And in this section, we've also included, very rightly, issues around mental health and its impact on a student's inclusion in the community, and the responsibility that educators have, even though we're not doctors, even though we're not social workers. I'll give a perfect example. We need to be aware, and we need to understand, and we need to program that if we say to a student who's dealing with extreme anxiety, you just got to get it together and get your assignment in, we're actually setting the stage for something that actually exacerbates that and moves that child or that adolescent further away from that place of inclusion. This, I think, is one of the most significant parts of this report. It's complex, it's tough, but I think it's real. I won't go into too many details except to say around examinations of policies, procedures, and practices that we're not closing things. We're not trying to create one-size-fits-all. We are trying to focus on the students. But we also have to look at our admission processes. We have to look at when we might say publicly, if you have special needs, you won't do okay here. I'm going to be candid. We have to look at what it is that is inviting students to these opportunities and what it is that is blocking these students from opportunities. And instead of thinking that we always need a special space in place, which again are not being touched in this recommendation, how can we utilize student voice to ensure that what is happening at every school is allowing us to match the interests, strengths, passions, stories, and needs of the students that are there? And we've got some strategies that we could implement should you give us this direction. This was a hard one for staff. The Enhancing Equity Task Force report talked about a neighborhood school and defined it in a certain way. But our reality is different. 48% of our secondary students do not go to the school that would be their home school, and 22% of our elementary students do not go to their home school. We have multiple programs in schools. What we're putting forward here, and we would need your support, is that some of our schools do have the ability to create one united and inclusive school for all, regardless if you're in French or gifted, you're in the neighborhood or whatever. And some, on the other end of the continuum, operate as distinct schools within a school. We find that that distinct school within a school model is not as healthy as the one where, even with diverse programming, there's still a sense of one community, one school. And we can do some things structurally to make that happen. Enhancing voice on all levels for the purpose of improving student achievement and well-being, promoting effective learning. And the reason I say that is because we could get involved in all kinds of consultation, all kinds of engagement. Voice is always significant. But in the Toronto District School Board, we have a focus, and we have to keep coming back to our students throughout. The equitable resource allocation is the tough part. We want to do everything for everybody, and that's really valid, and that's really wonderful. But we're on a finite budget. We need to examine the legacy practices of where the dollars go, and based upon the guiding principles of what we mean by equity, what we mean by access, what we mean by opportunity, there may need to be some tough decisions and political advocacy. And I'll leave that with you because I think we'll be able to show you where the gaps are and where you might be able to focus some of your energies in that way. The concept of the strategy for Black student achievement, and I appreciated the delegates who said we struggled if we were to put it separate or if we were to embed it. We do believe that anti-Black racism is an issue throughout, and that is the intention, and certainly we can look at the wording there. But for tonight, we decided to place it separate on purpose. We didn't go as a staff response as far as asking the board for permission around the center, even though it is clearly stated in the process. But we do know that the collaboration around a strategy could, with your direction or your support or your questions, include that. So we didn't go that far because, again, there's still more to come, and I'm going to close shortly and explain kind of how I see or how I propose to offer you some insights around what this report is and what this report isn't. And lastly, we need a staff that feels good about being in the Toronto District School Board, supported in the Toronto District School Board, honored for who they are and what they bring, the wisdom, the expertise, and the like. And we also need a staff that reflects our diverse community, and we got to look at our practices to make that happen. So what is this then? The goal would be that through this, the board would pass a direction. That direction would support the emerging multi-year plan that hopefully will be finished by the end of the school year. These directions will hopefully then, if you pass them, support all of the work plans, all of the strategies that exist in our board to create that coherence that we require for this very important work. And though you probably won't be able to see this, and I'll share it with you because you will, this just shows how staff sees everything connected. How the multi-year plan will guide us, the vision for learning, which is my plan, will support us, and then how some of the other key pieces below will allow us to fulfill the goals. This slide, I think, is important. The guiding principles of equity that we're following is that it's not good enough to simply have good intentions. There has to be impact. They need to be measurable. And you're not seeing these here tonight because, again, let me clarify, this isn't the action plan. This is board, now it's committee, next week it's board. Do you agree with these directions? Do these resonate? And if so, then we can get about the work of ensuring that we have the measurements, that we have the ability to communicate, and so forth. There is no such thing as neutral. And I say this with the greatest amount of respect, that as we move across this board, and all of us in this room have been at many community meetings, most community meetings take on a voice. And there's a dominant voice in any community meeting, and there are voices that may never speak because they don't know if they can find their voice in that particular space. And you go to another meeting and there's a different potential dominant voice. So what we've learned is there are no neutral spaces. And that's just simply important for us to consider. And as we heard the passionate delegates tonight, which I'm so grateful for, it also speaks to how we may differ across this great board of ours in terms of what's most important to people. For example, since arriving here in 2016, I've never experienced such divergent views around how special education is offered. I've been in 4 boards. It's fine. It's not a criticism. It's just, it's deep, it's passionate, it's real, and people are fighting for their children. We get it. It's just hard at a system level because there's little agreement. So all the people who might say, for example, that streaming is problematic, or excuse me, a de-streaming, I hate that word because we're not allowed to do that anyway. No de-streaming. It's grade 9 academic. Some of our families have been begging for that forever. And others have been saying, please don't. Next point. This is the message around special education that I'm wanting the board to hear. Because we've got so many divergent views, we want to change the culture around the IPRC process so that family voice actually has greater influence. We're not closing anything, but right now sometimes people feel pushed in one direction or another. The concept of including students with special needs in our regular classes, because it's a family's right under the Act, has been happening forever. It's not a new concept. It's just that our culture hasn't always opened the door in every place to such a thing. The concept of majority and minority, we've had this discussion in this committee and board before. It's not about numbers. It can't be about numbers. It's not about a vote and which votes add up to we should do special education this way or that way and the like. And my last comment is systems and structures drive practice. I am a firm believer that we have to transform ourselves through learning, but we also need to change some structures that sometimes actually keep us in certain ways. And so there are some structural changes here because that actually can compel change, cause a little discomfort. In the world of education, we talk about interrupting things so we can relearn or unlearn and decide how to move forward. It's personal, what I bring, it's communal, what we bring, and it's structural. But structural change is the hardest because lots of times it's almost beyond us. And I'm closing by saying these proposals support staff learning, which I think leads directly to students. It talks about attitudes, structures, policies, and practices, which may need to be revised in order for access and opportunity to be here. It's about relationships. We are a human organization. I know we get challenged about being a big bureaucracy, and there's probably some validity to that at times, but we are a human organization based upon relationships, not simply structures of bureaucracy. We need to align our resources to our commitments. We need to respond to our Black students and our families because of what our data says, and we do need to really evaluate our employee services practices aligned with human rights as we've discussed. Many participated in this process. And what I will end with is I am grateful that just about everyone who spoke through this process said all students. How we get to all students, maybe not as much agreement, but all students front and center. And everyone who wrote says, of course, they deserve to succeed. And I'll end by saying, I personally am grateful to be a part of a board who's courageous enough to name the barriers that exist and to face them. I'm sure you know that not every public entity is willing to, and if you weren't willing to, I wouldn't be speaking like this. because I work with you and you set the direction. And if this wasn't a direction that you were comfortable with, I wouldn't actually be permitted to be this candid in a public forum. So I thank you for your leadership. I thank our community, our staff, our students, our parents for the passion and the wisdom and the insight of what's gone on over the last 2 years. And I think that we are moving this entire organization to a great place. Please keep in mind as I close, there's policy issues in here that mean we have to go back out to the community by our policy process. This isn't a done deal. Policy does not happen because I put an idea in front of you. It goes back out to the community. There are issues in this report that need students and their voice. There are issues in this report that need our advisory committees and our PIAC and our SEAC. So it's not a done deal, but we need your direction so we can move forward and start to get to the action plans that show impact, not just intent. Thank you.